Good evening, I'm Soraya Mia and you are watching AWANI Tonight. Is Malaysia ready for post-COVID life? How are we preparing for endemicity? And Russia agrees to temporary ceasefire again to allow citizens to leave after failed attempts. That's coming up. International travelers who are not fully vaccinated must undergo 5 days of quarantine upon arrival in Malaysia. Health Minister Khairi Jamaluddin says they will be subjected to local COVID-19 protocols when in the country, including not being allowed to dine in at restaurants.
For travellers who are still under quarantine, their quarantine will end on April 1st. As for travellers aged 17 and below, Khairi said they do not have to be quarantined irregardless of their vaccination status. However, they must undergo a COVID-19 test within 24 hours of arriving in Malaysia. Meanwhile, in curbing the spread of the virus, Khairi added that nightclubs in the country will still remain shut as they are considered high risk for COVID-19 transmission. These are among the new SOPs that will take effect on April 1st, when Malaysia enters the transition to endemicity phase.
Khairi assures the public that although cases are high at the moment, the government is still aiming for the peak of the COVID wave to pass by the end of this month, if SOPs are followed.
We still maintain that we hope that we'll pass the peak by the end of this month, but it could be more than 30,000, could be more than 40,000. Really depends on mobility of people and whether or not they continue to stick with the SOPs that we still have until the 1st of April. Ya, jadi penting di sini, it's very important that whatever SOPs that we announced yesterday, that's only applicable on the 1st of April.
Commenting on whether the reopening of borders will bring about a surge in COVID cases, Khairi said that it is likely, but the government has done its risk assessment to allow for the country to reopen safely.
It may, but we've done a risk assessment, and we don't look at number of cases. We're not China. We cannot do your zero containment, zero case policy. No other country in the world is doing that. Only you are doing that. Congratulations. But no other country can do that. We have to make a risk assessment and live with COVID-19 in a safe manner. Yeah, no other countries has the luxury or the authority, if I may say so, to impose such a containment policy anymore.
Now, as the country transitions into the endemic phase, the government will reduce SOPs from the existing 181 to just one, starting April 1st.
Senior Minister Datuk Sri Hishamuddin Hussein said the one SOP contains 10 requirements that will continue to be enforced under the Prevention and Control of Infectious Diseases Act 1988. Among the 10 requirements include the need to wear face masks as well as practicing physical distancing. Besides the one SOP, there will also be 9 guidelines on activities for the public to follow, which will not be enforced, but the people are encouraged to adhere to them to reduce the risk of infection. The guidelines will be published on a website 2 weeks before April 1st.
The new SOPs announced by the government are timely, according to Astro Muhammad Khalib from the Galen Center for Health and Social Policy. He, however, reminds Malaysians to view the relaxation of these SOPs as a privilege that must not be taken lightly.
These are all positive announcements that are made by the government and something that we should be able to look out for. But the issue here is really that the reopening of Malaysia's borders to international travelers and so forth was inevitable. It was going to happen sooner rather than later, and it is a measure of the government's confidence in the progress made in ensuring vaccination coverage of the population, as well as understanding of the country's COVID-19 epidemic. It's not because we don't know, but it's exactly because we know a lot more about how this epidemic in Malaysia actually evolves, which is why the decision has been made. And it is certainly more than what most countries are able to do in this region. And it's only possible due to the privileges and advances made, ensuring that not only most of the population are vaccinated, but are also able to be provided with boosters.
Astro said what's more important is for the public to adhere to existing SOPs, such as wearing face masks and avoiding crowded indoor spaces. In dealing with the unvaccinated, Astro emphasized how they should not be discriminated against so that they are encouraged to take the vaccine.
We have to accommodate them. I'm of the view that you should never force someone to take something into their own body forcefully. It needs to be a voluntary decision, which is why I don't agree in the case of COVID-19 of it being a mandatory vaccination. And it is necessary for us to ensure that these people are not discriminated against either. We shouldn't deprive them of services. We shouldn't not allow them entry into places of public service and so forth, and it's important that they also be taken into consideration for them to come to the decision point of getting vaccinated if they want to.
The tourism sector is one of the sectors badly hit from the global pandemic. Now that international borders are set to open on April 1st, how is the industry preparing for an influx of foreign tourists? Secretary General of Malaysian Association of Tour and Travel Agents, or MATA, Nigel Wong, is here to share his insights.
Only thing that we may have to be aware of is that there will be still a bit of uncertainty at the beginning, especially when countries are still grappling or grasping the new endemic state that we're heading into. SOPs will be there, but what we're looking at the moment is that SOPs in many countries are going to be far more relaxed. So it's going to be a little bit easier to travel than the last 1 year. In terms of travel trends, of course, there is a strong indication that travelers are looking for destinations that they consider safe and clean. So a lot of emphasis will need to go into making sure that the perception of a destination matches the perception of the travelers' new requirements, and also that when they do arrive at the destination, industry stakeholders are well prepared to handle any of these concerns. So I think on top of that, it's just really going to be that people are going to be looking for new products, and travel trends will change that way. It'll be more to the great outdoors. People will be looking for travel packages that are going to be more smaller. People travel in smaller groups, and that's the sort of pattern that we're expecting within the next year or so.
We'll be right back after the break. Stay tuned.
Semua yang terjadi adalah berita, tetapi tiada siapa yang boleh bawakan yang terkini dan tergempar seperti kami.
Dilihat hanya memberi wang tanpa matlamat yang tepat. Dia tidak melakukan apa-apa kesalahan.
Untuk mendapatkan jawapan yang bermakna, kita perlu soalan yang tepat.
Amat sedih dengan apa yang berlaku ke atas.
Tiada ruang untuk berita palsu.
Negara kita telah merekodkan kes harian baru sebanyak
hanya fakta yang diberikan.
Amat penting untuk meneruskan perjuangan negara melawan pandemik ini.
Sentiasa memastikan suara anda, suara
Welcome back. Ukraine says Russia has agreed to a ceasefire again to allow civilians to leave via 6 humanitarian corridors. The ceasefire will happen from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. local time. Russia had promised to allow safe passage from the cities of Kiev, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Sumy, and Mariupol in the past few days. But so far, only one corridor has been opened out of Sumy on Tuesday. The failed attempts to open safe exit routes have left hundreds of thousands of people trapped without access to medicine or fresh water. Russia has claimed it would prefer to reach its goals in Ukraine through talks. Russian Foreign Ministry says Moscow does not plan to overthrow the Kiev government. Meanwhile, the European Union has agreed to a new round of sanctions targeting senior Russian officials and oligarchs. The sanctions will also include restrictions on the maritime sector and exclude 3 banks in Belarus from the SWIFT banking system. According to the UN, 2 million people have fled Ukraine, less than 2 weeks after Russia's invasion began. That makes up around 4.5% of the total population. Meanwhile, crude oil prices jumped again today after U.S. President Joe Biden announced a ban on Russian oil. The prices of oil have soared to its highest in 14 years amid a Russia-Ukraine conflict that prompted fears on energy supply disruptions from key exporter Russia. The price of a barrel of crude has skyrocketed since Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine, with the price now roughly double its low in early December. Britain also announced it will phase out imports of Russian oil and oil products by year-end, but the country will continue to allow natural gas imports from Russia. So far, there are only 2 countries to impose an outright ban. Analysts say Europe is likely to face the brunt of the current commodity crisis. In other news, South Koreans head to the polls today to vote for the country's next president. It is shaping up to be a tight race between Lee Jae-myung from the ruling Democratic Party and Yoon Suk-yeol from the main opposition People Power Party.
The two men are vying to succeed incumbent President Moon Jae-in for control of Asia's 4th largest economy. Moon is constitutionally barred from seeking re-election. Polls showed a slight edge for Yoon, who secured a last-minute boost when another candidate dropped out and threw his support behind Yoon. A former prosecutor general, Yoon has promised to fight corruption, foster justice and create a more level playing field while seeking a harder line towards North Korea and a reset with China. Lee, meanwhile, was governor of the country's most populous province of Gyeonggi and shot to fame on the back of his aggressive COVID-19 responses and advocacy for universal basic income.
Australia declares national emergency after severe flooding devastated the country's east coast and claimed at least 20 lives. The cost of the flooding from heavy downpour that started 2 weeks ago has hit $1 billion. Tens of thousands of residents from Sydney, Brisbane and its surrounding areas were forced to flee their homes. Frustrated residents with no access to power and internet for several days blamed authorities for slow relief efforts. The emergency declaration announced by Prime Minister Scott Morrison would hand the government more power to deploy aid and personnel. The floods had put climate change in focus ahead of a national election, as the current government has been criticized for its inaction on the climate. Hong Kong is putting a plan to test its entire population for COVID on hold in what appears to be the latest flip-flop in the government's pandemic response. Chief Executive Carrie Lam says that its priority now is to reduce the number of deaths, especially among the elderly. Lam said the government had not decided on a time frame for the compulsory testing, given the huge scale of the operation. The mass testing announcement 2 weeks ago, coupled with rumors of a city-wide lockdown, had triggered panic buying of groceries and essentials in Hong Kong. The city of 7.4 million people is grappling with an Omicron outbreak that has pushed hospitals to the breaking point. More than 500,000 infections and over 2,000 deaths have been recorded in Hong Kong since the 5th wave began at the end of December. With public mortuaries running out of space, officials have deployed refrigerated containers to store bodies. Many of the victims are the unvaccinated elderly. How can the next Johor government set a course not just for COVID-19 related recovery, but longer-term development priorities? Tonight on Consider This, Sharat Kuttan speaks to our guests about Johor's development challenges and its prospects. That's all we have for you on Awani Tonight. Get the latest news updates on astroawani.com, or you can also download the Astro Awani app. My name is Raya Mia. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next episode.